People like us don't change the world, my grandmother said as she handed me the last $200 from her savings account. We just survive in it. I was 24, standing in the cramped kitchen of her South Boston apartment where I'd grown up. The ancient refrigerator hummed in the background, struggling like everything else in this neighborhood. My name is Eliza Chen, and that day, the day my acceptance letter to MIT's graduate program arrived, was supposed to be the proudest moment of my life. Instead, it became the day I lost my last living relative. You're throwing away everything we've built, Uncle Philip shouted, his face flushed with anger. The family business needs you now, not years from now after you've wasted time on academic fantasies. The family business was Chen's Auto Repair, the shop my immigrant grandparents had opened 40 years ago. My uncle had taken over after my grandfather died, and everyone assumed I would eventually join him. It was expected, predetermined, my duty. What they didn't understand was that I had inherited more than just my grandfather's name. I'd inherited his original dream. Before America ground him down with practical realities, before a small auto shop became his legacy instead of the engineering innovations he'd once imagined, my grandfather had been an inventor. Late at night, he'd show me his sketches, engine designs that were decades ahead of their time, energy systems that big companies would eventually develop years later. In another life, he'd whisper, his eyes distant, these could have changed everything. I'd applied to MIT's program in Advanced Propulsion Systems with one goal: to build what my grandfather couldn't, to finish what circumstance had forced him to abandon. This isn't just about school, I tried explaining to my uncle. The research I want to do could revolutionize how engines work, make them cleaner, more efficient. Revolutionize? Uncle Philip scoffed. Your grandfather spent 30 years changing oil and fixing transmissions to put food on our table. That's real life, Eliza, not some fancy research lab. My grandmother, who'd remained silent throughout the argument, finally spoke. Let her go, Philip. Keeping her here won't bring your father back. Uncle Philip stormed out, leaving me alone with my grandmother. She shuffled to the drawer where she kept her emergency money and counted out 10 worn $20 bills. I wanted to give you more, she said apologetically, pressing the money into my palm. But this is all I have. I can't take this, I protested, knowing how little she'd lived on. You must. Her weathered hands closed mine around the bills. Your scholarship covers tuition, but you'll need something to start with. She hugged me, her tiny frame somehow still strong. Just remember, she whispered, people like us have to work twice as hard to get half as far. Don't let anyone tell you what you're worth. That night, I packed everything that mattered into one suitcase: clothes, my grandfather's notebook of designs, and a photo of us standing proudly in front of the auto shop. By morning, I was on a bus to Cambridge with $200, a full scholarship that barely covered tuition, and no idea how I would survive. MIT was everything I dreamed of and everything I feared. The campus buzzed with brilliant minds from privileged backgrounds, people who'd never worried about paying rent or supporting family back home. My cohort in the engineering program included graduates from elite universities, children of successful entrepreneurs, and international students from wealthy families. Then there was me, the scholarship kid from Southie with a community college degree and grease still embedded in her fingernails. During orientation, I met Trevor Wellington IV, yes, the actual fourth in his family with that name. His father's investment firm had funded half the technology startups in Boston. Chen, he mused when we introduced ourselves. Any relation to Chen Technologies? No, I said simply, not explaining that the only Chen enterprise I was connected to specialized in muffler replacements, not technology ventures. Shame, he replied with casual disappointment. Father's always looking for promising Asian-led startups to diversify the portfolio. I smiled tightly and moved away, adding his casual condescension to the chip already forming on my shoulder. My first semester was brutal. While my classmates debated theoretical problems over expensive dinners, I worked 3 campus jobs just to afford my half of the rent in a dilapidated apartment shared with 4 other students. I served coffee at dawn in the campus cafe, assisted in the engineering lab during afternoons, and spent evenings cleaning offices in the research building. Between shifts, I attended classes running on caffeine and determination. At night, I studied until my eyes burned, falling asleep with my grandfather's notebooks open beside me. The department's annual innovation competition came around in November. The prize, $25,000 and a summer internship at Helios Dynamics, the country's leading clean energy engineering firm. For most of my classmates, it was a prestigious addition to already impressive resumes. For me, it was oxygen. I submitted my design for what I called a regenerative combustion system, essentially an engine that could capture and reuse its own thermal energy, dramatically improving efficiency while reducing emissions. The concept had begun in my grandfather's notebooks, but I'd refined it with everything I was learning, incorporating new materials and computational models he could never have accessed. When the finalists were announced, my name was among them. So was Trevor Wellington's. The night before our presentations, I was pulling a late shift cleaning the engineering building when I overheard voices from Professor Harlow's office. "Wellington's design has commercial applications we can implement immediately," said a voice I recognized as Dean Porter's. His family connections alone make him the obvious choice. "The competition is supposed to be judged on innovation, not connections," Professor Harlow argued. "The Chen girl's design is revolutionary. Rough around the edges, yes, but with potential we haven't seen in years." "Be realistic, Margaret," the dean countered. "Wellington comes with funding opportunities, family backing, the right pedigree. The Chen girl? Brilliant, perhaps, but without resources or connections, what can she really accomplish? This industry isn't just about good ideas." I stood frozen, mop in hand, as they continued discussing how my background made me a risky investment compared to someone like Trevor, regardless of whose design was better. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat at my desk, staring at my grandfather's photo, his words echoing. Ideas without opportunity remain just dreams. The next day, I presented my design to the judges with such fierce clarity and technical precision that even Trevor looked concerned. When questioned about practical implementation, I didn't just have theories, I had detailed manufacturing processes informed by years of hands-on mechanical work that my competitors lacked. "This isn't conceptual," I explained, showing how my design could be retrofitted to existing engines. "I've built simpler versions in my grandfather's shop. This works." A week later, the results were announced. I received second place. Trevor won. The internship, the money, the connections, all went to him. I received a certificate and a $2,000 runner-up prize that barely covered next month's expenses. That evening, Professor Harlow found me in the lab, still working despite the disappointment. "Your design was superior," she said without preamble. "Apparently not superior enough," I replied, not looking up from my calculations. "You know how these things work, Eliza. But don't give up." She placed a business card on my desk. "Catherine Mendoza at Mendoza Tech saw your presentation. She'd like to meet you." I'd heard of Catherine Mendoza, a legendarily tough, self-made engineer who'd built a mid-sized firm focused on specialized propulsion systems. What I didn't know then was that she'd grown up in a neighborhood not unlike mine, fought through the same prejudices, and recognized in my work something familiar. Our meeting was scheduled for the following week, but 3 days before, my grandmother had a stroke. The call came during class. Uncle Philip, frantic, saying I needed to come home immediately. I withdrew from the semester, packed my research, and took the first bus back to Boston. For the next 2 months, I split my time between my grandmother's hospital bed and the auto shop, which was falling apart without Uncle Philip's full attention. "I'm sorry," my grandmother whispered one evening, her speech still slurred from the stroke. "Your grandfather would be so disappointed." Another Chen with big dreams forced back to reality. "Don't say that," I told her, squeezing her hand. "This is temporary." But as bills mounted and her condition stabilized but didn't improve, temporary stretched into 6 months. I missed my meeting with Catherine Mendoza. My scholarship was deferred but not guaranteed if I took too long to return. The auto shop barely generated enough income to cover my grandmother's care and the household expenses. Then came the letter from Helios Dynamics announcing their groundbreaking new engine design that increased efficiency by 22%, remarkably similar to the 30% improvement my design had projected, though with several key elements simplified or removed. The press release featured Trevor Wellington prominently as the lead design engineer. I recognized enough of my work to know what had happened, but with no resources to fight it and no proof beyond my competition submission, I had nothing but cold fury and renewed determination. That night, I sat in my grandfather's old workshop behind the auto shop, surrounded by tools and the ghosts of abandoned dreams. On his workbench, I spread out my designs, his notebooks, and the Helios press release. They took part of it, I said aloud to his memory, but they didn't get all of it, and they don't know what I know now. Looking around the shop, at the equipment, the tools, the parts, I saw something I missed before. I didn't need MIT's labs to build a prototype. I needed ingenuity, mechanical skill, and the very things I'd been trying to escape. This shop, these tools, this life that had taught me to fix broken things with limited resources. For the next year, I lived a double life. During days, I ran Chen's Auto Repair, gradually modernizing it, bringing in new customers, and stabilizing our finances. Evenings and weekends, I built my prototype, ordering specialized parts when I could afford them, fabricating others myself, and adapting my design to work with what I had available. I also cultivated a relationship with one particular customer, Rachel Mendez, a paralegal at a law firm specializing in intellectual property. She became fascinated with my project, offering both legal insights and connections that eventually proved invaluable. 15 months after returning home, 3 things happened in rapid succession. My grandmother passed away peacefully in her sleep. Uncle Philip announced he was selling the auto shop to a developer, and my prototype engine, built in that same shop from parts I'd scrounged, modified, and created, achieved a 34% efficiency improvement over standard engines. At my grandmother's funeral, Uncle Philip pulled me aside. "I'm sorry about the shop," he said gruffly, "but the developer's offer will let me retire early. You should take your share and go back to school." "I'm not going back to school," I told him. "I'm starting a company." He looked at me like I'd lost my mind. "With what? Your share isn't even 6 figures. "It's enough," I said with certainty, "especially with what I've built." Through Rachel, I was introduced to Sandra Liu, a venture capitalist known for taking chances on unconventional founders. I brought my prototype, my complete designs, and a business plan for what I called Phoenix Propulsion Systems. "Why Phoenix?" Sandra asked after witnessing my prototype in action. "Because it rose from ashes," I replied simply. "Just like I did." She invested $1.5 million for a 25% stake, significantly less than I was asking for, but enough to secure a small manufacturing space, hire 2 engineers who'd been laid off from larger firms, and file the patents I needed to protect my work. I also sent an email to Catherine Mendoza, apologizing for missing our meeting 2 years earlier and explaining the circumstances. I didn't expect a response, but 3 days later, she was standing in my workshop, examining my prototype with critical eyes. "Helios announced something similar last year," she said, giving nothing away in her expression. "They announced a fraction of what I designed," I corrected her. "This is the complete system, with improvements." She tested my prototype herself, measuring outputs, questioning my methodology, challenging every claim. After 3 hours, she looked up and said simply, "I'd like to partner with you." Mendoza Tech became our manufacturing partner, giving Phoenix access to production facilities and distribution channels we couldn't have access for years otherwise. In exchange, Mendoza received exclusive manufacturing rights and a percentage of each unit sold. The first year was brutal. Helios, realizing the threat we posed, launched both legal challenges and a ruthless pricing strategy aimed at crushing us before we could establish ourselves. Trevor Wellington, now a rising executive there, led the charge, publicly dismissing our technology as derivative and unproven. But what Helios didn't understand was that I'd spent my entire life learning to survive with less. Phoenix operated with minimal overhead, focused on specialized markets Helios considered too small, and built relationships with manufacturers looking for competitive advantages. Our breakthrough came in the most unexpected way. A major Japanese motorcycle manufacturer was seeking ways to meet stringent new emission standards without sacrificing power. Our system, more compact and efficient than anything Helios offered, provided the perfect solution. The contract was worth $12 million. More importantly, it validated our technology on a global stage. 3 years after starting Phoenix, we had grown to 68 employees, held 14 patents, and were profitable enough to move into a dedicated facility in the industrial district not far from my grandfather's old shop. Uncle Philip, who had initially dismissed my company nonsense, now proudly wore Phoenix-branded shirts and told everyone his niece was a big-shot engineer. Then came the call from Sandra. "Helios is looking to acquire Phoenix. she said without preamble. They're offering $120 million. I laughed. They're offering to buy what they tried to steal. It's a serious offer, Eliza. That's life-changing money for everyone involved, especially you as the majority shareholder. I'll think about it, I promised, already knowing my answer. The meeting was scheduled at Helios headquarters in their sleek downtown office tower. I arrived intentionally 10 minutes late, dressed not in the expected formal business attire but in a crisp button-down shirt with a Phoenix logo and dark jeans, the uniform of someone who still worked with their hands when needed. Trevor Wellington was waiting in the conference room, now Executive Vice President of Acquisition Strategy. He'd aged well in the traditional sense, expensive haircut, tailored suit, the confident posture of someone who'd never had his worth questioned. Eliza, he greeted me with practiced warmth. Wonderful to see you again. Your company has made quite an impression. Enough of an impression for you to offer $120 million for technology you once called derivative, I noted, taking a seat across from him. His smile tightened slightly. Market conditions evolve. We recognize the value Phoenix brings to the table. For the next hour, Trevor and his team outlined their vision. Phoenix would be absorbed into Helios, our technology integrated into their product lines, our brand gradually phased out. I would receive a generous compensation package including a 3-year executive position reporting to Trevor. When they finished, the room fell silent. All eyes on me. Your offer is inadequate, I said simply. Trevor blinked. Perhaps we could adjust the financial terms. This isn't about money, I interrupted. It's about recognition and control. Phoenix stays independent. We'll consider a strategic partnership where Helios licenses our technology at market rates, while we maintain our brand and operational autonomy. That's not the type of arrangement we're proposing, Trevor replied, his corporate veneer cracking slightly. I gathered my materials and stood. Then we don't have anything to discuss. You're making a mistake, Trevor called as I reached the door. You can't compete with Helios long term. Without our resources, without our connections. I turned back, meeting his gaze directly. That's where you've always been wrong, Trevor. You think success comes from having resources. I know it comes from being resourceful. 6 months later, Phoenix announced a breakthrough. Our second-generation engine system with efficiency improvements of 42% and emissions reductions that exceeded all projected global standards for the next decade. Our stock, yes, we'd gone public by then, doubled overnight. Helios came back to the table, this time offering partnership terms that acknowledged Phoenix's independent value and my continued leadership. We negotiated a deal that gave both companies strategic advantages while preserving what I'd built. On the day we signed the agreement, I drove to my old neighborhood and parked outside the building that had once housed Chen's Auto Repair. The developer had transformed it into luxury condominiums, erasing all physical evidence of my family's decades of work. From my car, I retrieved a small package wrapped in brown paper. Inside was my grandfather's original notebook of engine designs, now framed alongside a photo of our new Phoenix headquarters and a simple note. Dreams delayed are not dreams denied. I placed it on the steps of the building, took a photo with my phone, and sent it to Uncle Philip with the message. Remember when you said people like us don't change the world? Turns out, we just needed the right tools. As I drove away, my phone rang, the special ringtone I'd assigned to my executive assistant. Ms. Chen, she said when I answered, Catherine Mendoza is on line 1. She says it's urgent. I smiled, thinking about how far I'd come from that day with $200 in my grandmother's kitchen. Tell her I'm on my way back to the office, I replied, and I'm ready for whatever's next. Because the truth I'd learned, the truth I live by now, was that your worth isn't determined by where you start, who believes in you, or what others try to take from you. It's built through what you create, what you overcome, and what you refuse to surrender. Sometimes the greatest revenge against those who underestimated you isn't proving them wrong. It's making their opinion irrelevant.